We all love a fictional genius character. Whether solving crimes or building high-tech suits, these geniuses always leave a mark. But the way we see these characters and what we expect from them has changed a lot over time. Sherlock Holmes was one of the first. Cool-headed, brilliant, and often hard to relate to, he set the standard for what a genius looked like. No matter the century, the detective in the deerstalker hat remains our cultural shorthand for brilliance. From logic and deduction to emotional dysfunction and arrogance, the genius has always been a paradox, admired yet alien, powerful yet profoundly alone. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle created Sherlock Holmes in 1887 during a cultural love affair with logic. The Victorian era worshipped science. With the rise of steam-powered ships, Darwin's theories reshaped creation myths. Medicine and chemistry promised to outpace superstition. In this world, Holmes was a fantasy of perfect clarity. His clues weren't magical. They were inevitable conclusions drawn from patterns others missed. His sharp mind was cutting through messy situations with ease. In Doyle's stories, Holmes often feels more like a machine than a person. He believes emotions get in the way of clear thinking, and he stays away from romance like it's something dangerous, which in Victorian London might have been a smart choice. But the brilliance came at a cost. Holmes' arrogance is baked into his DNA. He plays the violin wildly, turns to drugs when he's bored, and often treats Dr. Watson like both a sidekick and a spectator to his cleverness. He knows he's the smartest person in the room and doesn't hide it. While others trust their gut or beliefs, Holmes relies only on logic and distance. This makes him the perfect example of the genius outsider, someone brilliant but disconnected from normal people and everyday emotions. As the 20th century moved through wars and big changes, our idea of the genius started to shift. He was no longer just a smart hero. He became more complicated, even dangerous. The atomic bomb wasn't created by a villain, but by brilliant scientists. People began to see that intelligence wasn't always good or bad. It could help the world or destroy it. Holmes too began to change. In modern interpretations, Holmes becomes less of a thinking machine and more of a man-shaped contradiction. We see him struggle with addiction, antisocial behavior, and emotional immaturity. The focus shifts from his mind's power to his instability. He's not just smarter than everyone else, he's also colder and often unkind. His genius is isolating and the audience feels it. Benedict Cumberbatch's Holmes calls himself a high-functioning sociopath, a diagnosis never clinically confirmed, but cinematically potent. He is often framed as someone incapable of typical human connection, something that makes him both fascinating and tragic. We start to see that being a genius doesn't just affect others, it takes a toll on the genius too. The idea of the genius changes. Now, being smart can also mean being troubled. This reflects bigger worries in our world. As technology grows faster than we can fully understand, tech geniuses are seen as both heroes and outsiders. People admire Elon Musk's bold ideas and Steve Jobs' creativity, but they're also uneasy about their strange behavior and how they treat others. In the 21st century, Holmes isn't just smart, he's connected. Today's genius doesn't sit quietly in a study. He moves through a world of data, surveillance, and digital clues. The Mind Palace from Doyle's time has become something more like a computer cloud. This change matches how we now deal with information. In shows like Sherlock, solving a mystery is about reading texts, tracing IP addresses, and understanding someone through their social media. A genius today isn't someone who sees hidden things, it's someone who can make sense of the endless info we're all buried under. But as Holmes becomes more tech-savvy, he also becomes more emotionally distant. Modern versions show him as socially awkward, struggling with feelings, and sometimes even going to therapy. And that's the twist. Today's genius knows he's not okay. This change shows a bigger shift in how we see intelligence. We no longer believe someone can be brilliant without paying a price. Doyle's Holmes seemed untouchable, but today we expect geniuses to grow, struggle, and reflect. Being smart isn't enough. We want the genius to change, maybe even say sorry. So why does the genius trope persist, especially in the form of Sherlock Holmes? Because we're torn. Admire Holmes because he represents clarity in a chaotic world. He knows things. When society is fragmented, when truth feels negotiable, the Holmes figure promises that the facts still matter and someone can still know them. His mind is a sanctuary from noise, but we also resent him. His coldness is off-putting. His superiority can feel cruel. He rarely follows rules, often disregards emotions, and treats people like puzzles. He's the genius who doesn't need us, just our data, and yet we return to him again and again. However, there is a special thrill in watching a genius go bad. Not just fail or fumble, but choose darkness. That's the story of Walter White, a name that once stood for dull chemistry teachers and now conjures up images of violence, manipulation, and the seductive pull of unchecked intellect. In many ways, Walter White is the Frankenstein of the modern genius, a man who starts as the underdog, then uses his towering brainpower to claw his way to the top because he's smart enough to get away with it. Once upon a time, the genius was a figure of comfort. Back in the 19th century, intelligence meant reason, science, deduction. Sherlock Holmes was the ultimate product of this era. Clean, logical, above the fray of messy human emotion. He solved problems, saved people, even smoked a pipe and played violin because, well, he was smart. Fast forward a couple centuries and that sense of clarity has collapsed. The genius character has been dragged off his pedestal and thrown into a messy cultural blender. Now he's less of a savior and more of an anti-hero. Smarter than everyone else? Sure, but also more bitter, more dangerous, more alone. When we meet him in Breaking Bad, he's not just smart, he's defeated, a high school chemistry teacher working part-time at a car wash, a man who once had the potential to revolutionize science, now scraping by to support his family. His genius is dormant after years of disappointment and compromise. Then he gets cancer and suddenly, intelligence becomes weaponized. Walter's transformation into Heisenberg isn't just about money or pride, it's about finally using the full extent of his brain. This man doesn't just cook meth, he reinvents it. While others see drugs as street business, Walt sees it as a chemistry equation, a challenge worthy of his intellect. And that's where the genius idea shifts into something sinister. Where the old school genius like Holmes used intelligence to bring order, Walt uses it to create chaos. He manipulates, outthinks, and outmaneuvers everyone around him. DEA agents, cartel bosses, former business partners, they all underestimate him until it's too late. This isn't about being the smartest person in the room, it's about making sure everyone knows it. Walt's descent is fueled by arrogance. As his intellect grows unchecked, so does his entitlement. He tells himself he's doing it for his family, but we know better. The truth drips out in moments of honesty, and that's the core of the modern genius. Brilliance used for self-gratification. The deeper Walt sinks into his empire, the clearer it becomes. Intelligence doesn't make people better, it just makes them more capable of hiding the worst parts of themselves. He lies with precision, he rationalizes with elegance, and because he's smarter than the people around him, they fall into his traps again and again. This is what makes Walter White so compelling and so terrifying. He represents the weaponization of intellect, the way genius can become a force multiplier for moral rot. He doesn't need to be stronger or faster or richer, he just needs to think faster than everyone else. And while the classic genius might have been emotionally distant or romantically indifferent, Walt is resentful. He feels the world owes him something for being smart. The bitterness comes under every monologue, every explosion of rage. His intelligence doesn't isolate him because he's misunderstood. It isolates him because he believes no one else deserves to stand beside him. Despite all these, audiences root for him for so long, even as he became increasingly monstrous. This is because Walter White is the fantasy of unleashed potential. He's the quiet kid in the back of the class who finally shows the world what he's capable of. He is revenge for everyone who ever felt invisible, overlooked, or underestimated. There's something undeniably thrilling about watching a nobody outsmart everybody, especially when those people represent institutions we secretly mistrust. Law enforcement, government, corporations. As Walt's empire grows, his lies increase. His victories come with body counts. He poisons children. He lets innocents die. And yet we are still compelled to watch. That's the genius paradox. We admire the intellect, even as we recoil from its effects. And then there's Jesse Pinkman, a mirror, and in many ways, a victim of Walt's brilliance. Jesse's humanity is messy, but intact. Watching the damage Walt inflicts on Jesse forces us to question our admiration. At what point does intelligence become villainy? Back in the 2000s and 2010s, public trust in institutions was crumbling. The financial crash of 2008 revealed that very smart people had engineered very stupid disasters. Brilliance no longer equaled morality, it equaled risk. Walt embodies that fear. He's not a cartoonish evil genius, he's a plausible one. Moreover, the rise of tech giants, data surveillance, and algorithmic control made us wary of genius. The Zuckerbergs, Musks, and Bezoses of the world weren't just nerds in hoodies. They were wielding unprecedented power, and not always with clear intentions. The new genius was no longer the detective or the scientist solving mysteries. He was the disruptor, the manipulator, and the man behind the curtain. Walter White fit this new mold perfectly, a man who uses knowledge to dominate, a man whose greatest crime is not meth, but the manipulation of people using their emotions, their fears, their trust. And yet Walter White's story is ultimately a tragedy because he proves his own theory, that genius collapses in on itself. He builds an empire, loses his family, and watches the wreckage from behind bulletproof glass. His intelligence becomes a prison. His mind is now a curse. In the final episodes, we're now watching a mastermind at the top of his game. We're watching a man crushed by the very intellect he once glorified. The cost of being the smartest person in the room turns out to be everything else. While some geniuses wear lab coats, some carry magnifying glasses. In this case, Tony Stark wears a metal suit, builds AI in a cave, and wisecracks his way through global crises. He's the heart, brains, and bruised ego of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a modern myth of genius incarnate. Brilliant, broken, brash, and beloved. The evolution of the genius archetype across literature and pop culture can be traced from the cold clinical logic of the 19th century to the chaotic, charisma-soaked mess that is Tony Stark in the 21st. And he might just be the definitive genius of our time. The early genius characters were all about order, think Sherlock Holmes, brilliant, emotionless, hyper-rational. Intelligence meant distance, removing oneself from the mess of emotion to process reality like a machine. In the 19th century, being smart meant being detached. Genius was cool, calm, and borderline alien. Then came the 20th century, and with it, the mad scientist, the troubled artist, the reclusive inventor. Genius became more volatile, more human. It still offered control, but now with consequences. Hence, the gifted mind could solve or create the problem. Then in the 21st century, an age of instant information, digital gods, and billionaires with tech empires, the modern genius became loud. He's no longer hidden in a study. He's on stage, in a press conference, building weapons, tweeting quips, and uploading his legacy to the cloud. He's full of big ideas, but also full of himself. He hides his pain behind jokes, cool sunglasses, and a loud personality. Moreover, Tony Stark doesn't just have intelligence, he is intelligence. He doesn't separate his brain from his brand. His genius is his currency, his armor, his drug. From the moment we meet him in Iron Man, he has already redefined the genius archetype. He's in a tuxedo, sipping scotch, surrounded by tech and models, cracking jokes about his own weapons. But the same mind that invents weapons of mass destruction also builds the Iron Man suit in a cave with a box of scraps. This is where Stark's character pulls us in. Every version of himself, billionaire playboy, arms dealer, superhero, mentor, is an answer to a crisis he built himself into or out of. Unlike traditional genius characters who are often cold and clinical, Tony Stark is hot-blooded, impulsive, and emotional. His brilliance doesn't make him distant, it makes him unstable. Even though he's arrogant, he's the smartest guy in the room and he knows it. But beneath the swagger lies a desperate need to matter, to be indispensable, to fix what his past mistakes have broken. This is where we find one of the most compelling layers of Stark's character, genius as atonement. The weapons he created are killing people, so now he will build armor, then AI, then time travel, then anything it takes to make sure he doesn't fail again. That's the tragic loop of the modern genius. Intelligence used not just to change the world, but to clean up after yourself. The smarter you are, the more wreckage you leave. From creating Ultron, an accidental Frankenstein AI, to turning Peter Parker into a child soldier in a metal suit, Stark's solution often spawned bigger problems. But we still root for him, because unlike cold geniuses of old, Tony feels every mistake. Behind the bravado, Tony Stark is alone. He's surrounded by friends, fame, and family, but emotionally, he's an island. That's another key evolution of the genius character, not just isolated because of superior intellect, but because of self-imposed emotional walls. Tony pushes people away because he knows how much they could hurt when he inevitably fails them. He distances himself from Pepper to protect her. He hesitates to get close to Peter because he's haunted by the loss of his own parents, and when he finally does open up, it's in fragmented moments. So why do we love Tony Stark, even when he's reckless, arrogant, or ethically questionable? Well, that's because he's trying. Unlike the emotionally distant geniuses of the past, Stark is constantly trying to be better. And he fails often, but he learns. He grows. He cracks jokes through trauma. He builds new versions of himself, literally and metaphorically. He's a genius, but he's not untouchable. We see his panic attacks, his PTSD, his guilt. We see a man who's smart enough to save the world, but still fragile enough to break down in a parking lot over New York's invasion. He gives genius a soul, and when he finally makes the ultimate sacrifice in Avengers Endgame, it's the impact of a decade-long arc of a man trying to earn the second chance he gave himself in a cave. And that's why, even long after his last snap, the genius lives on.